You're listening to Errol Parker and Clancy Overall, editors of the Betoota Advocate, on Desert Rock FM. Welcome back to the Betoota Advocate radio show, recording live here from downtown Betoota, and joined by Errol Parker, editor-at-large. How are you, Errol?
Good, mate. As usual, not a cloud in the sky up here in the Diamantina. A cracking day, not like down south where they're complaining about this thing called a cold snap.
Cold snaps, yeah. No, they haven't had a winter in the Diamantina, that's for sure.
Certainly not.
And, of course, myself, Clancy Overall. Today is a big coup for the Betoota Advocate. This marks our first Australian of the year. At all. Like, I mean, it's one thing to get an Australian of the year, but to get one on the year that they're Australian of the year, we're just so lucky that Grace Tame, today's guest, is across our humble Outback newspaper and was in the area, and we reached out and she said, you know what, I've got an hour between the subway and the Qantas Link flight out of here. So she's popped in, and we're very thankful for that. Thanks for joining us, Grace Tame.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm stoked to be here.
Now, you're obviously moving around a lot since you first landed on our screens out here. We saw you on the podium there, Australian of the Year. Where are you based most of the time? You're a Hobart girl?
Yeah, most of the time Hobart, but at the moment out of a suitcase.
Yeah. How do you find the suitcase living?
Oh, it's all right, actually. So I am from divorced parents who separated amicably when I was about, 2 years old. And so most of my life I lived out, well, it was a school bag at that stage. Yeah. So I'm pretty adaptable, and I've travelled around a lot, bit of a gypsy myself. Anyway. Yeah, like on and off, lived in the US for 7 years in various parts. Yeah.
Whereabouts over there?
Well, I started out in Santa Barbara. I went to a community college there for a couple of years, and then headed down to LA because I was doing illustration, so photorealistic illustration work, doing private commissions for some like high profile celebrities and stuff. And and then I ended up touring with John Cleese a couple of times around the country as his illustrator for some of his merchandise. Yeah.
Really?
Have you been able to keep that up?
No.
How why would John Cleese need a personal illustrator to follow him around to illustrate things?
It sounds a bit creepy, doesn't it?
Is that like a certain level of
followed him around?
He doesn't like photographers.
Yeah.
Well, no, the story goes, so I know his daughter really well. She's one of my best friends, who's a fantastic comedian in her own right. But she commissioned me to do a piece for John in 2016, it must have been. And it was just originally meant to be like just a joke sort of illustration. Like what it is, I think you can find it online if you type in Grace Tame, John Cleese, like you'd find it. It's a spoof of the Last Supper with the disciples traded out for references to John's work.
Oh, right.
So there's like Mr. Creosote's in there, there's like kangaroos in there, there's like random Kevin Kline from A Fish Called Wanda's in there, Lumberjack, etc. And
it's really detailed.
Yeah, so he liked it so much that he was like, "Oh, I want to sell this as merch."
All right.
Like, all right, cool. And then he so he did that, and then he also used it as his stage backdrop. So they just blew it up and put it behind him, and he did all his talks sitting in front of that. And that was fucking wild.
So that was a Hobart girl, packed your bags and went to the States?
Yeah.
Gap year-y kind of stuff that turned into 7 years, or?
Nah, it wasn't really a gap year. It was more like a lot of shit happened in high school, and we all know about that.
Yeah, skip town, get out of town.
Yeah.
Santa Barbara sounds like
it's a pretty lavish place.
Yeah,
honestly.
and it's a change from winter in Hobart too, I imagine.
Yeah.
Is that
exactly
in LA?
It's 90 minutes north on the coast.
Oh, that's
from
even
LA.
better.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what it is? It's Big Little Lies.
Yeah.
That kind of country.
In Monterey.
Yeah.
Monterey.
Yeah. Big Sur.
Big Sur.
Well, that's obviously a long way removed from Hobart and everything that had been going on as a young girl there. But then this last 6 months since Australian of the Year has been completely different to anything. I imagine anyone could really relate to. How has that been? That's you went straight from John Cleese. That's a big deal. John Cleese is illustrator, of course, but then now you're a household name that no one really ever imagines being a household name, do they?
No.
Especially not for what you've come to be known for.
Yeah,
as an advocate.
It's very, very weird set of circumstances because through the National Australia Day Council, I've thankfully been put in touch with previous Australians of the Year. But it's a very unique set of circumstances. Because, we had Rosie Batty, who won in 2016 for her work in the domestic violence space. So there's some parallels there because it's her personal story.
Yep.
But I was talking to Kerry O'Brien, actually, absolute legend. And he was saying, because he's been in the industry, the media industry, for decades, and he's had the opportunity to interview lots of Australians of the Year, and he was saying he's never seen a reaction just like this in terms of how, widely well received it was and what it's done for, I guess, what it's done for a community that have been marginalised and silenced for so long. So we don't actually really know yet how big it is, and it's just seems to be bigger than Ben-Hur. Everywhere I go, men and women are reaching out to me, and it's beautiful. It's overwhelming, but it's really beautiful to see that.
One thing, there was the march down there in Parliament, and one thing that kind of, from our end, as people who kind of look at the media and look at reactions to different things going on in the news, is that it kind of has stirred and kind of activated a lot of people in quiet towns that know your story. Like Betoota. Know your story and might have never piped up ever. Just kind of went on with life. Probably weren't even that political, probably didn't engage in that way. And now the conversation has started, and I guess you've given them license to put their hand up, permission.
Yeah, and I'm a utilitarian, so it's all about the greater good for me, and I'm very much happy to be that first person. And I think that's what I was sort of seeing privately, as I was realising, because I've always been open privately and I was having these conversations, I would notice that when I shared part of my truth with a group of people, even strangers sometimes, it would then spark someone to come up. And I thought, I wonder how many people in the world, and what if we were able to do this, where we were able to sort of have a more public acceptance of vulnerability and giving of permission to be human beings again. And the reaction has been overwhelmingly positive. There's a few people out there who, your rock spiders. Who,
absolutely. And also people who don't want to believe this can happen in this lovely world they live in. So, also head in the sand kind of attitudes towards... gaslighting you, I guess, in many ways by denying this truth that you've kind of been able to bring so many people into and help engage a lot of people. As you said before, it would be... And we saw the numbers at the march.
Yeah. It's not actually, you said before about people who weren't previously political. The thing is, it's actually not political.
Yeah.
It's very odd. I keep getting painted as the quote unquote poster child for Labor.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, that's what happens. Well, no,
I don't know.
That's what happens when you take pictures with Albanese. just
I took one picture.
Straight up all over every newspaper. It's like, look, here we go. She's going to be running for Hobart next.
Oh dear.
I don't think it's so much getting a photo with Albanese. It's more so delivering that speech next to the Prime Minister, who was visibly uncomfortable during the Australian of the Year ceremony.
Do you know what he said to me right after I finished that speech and we were in front of a wall of media? I shit you not. He leant over and right in my ear he goes, "Well, gee, I bet it felt good to get that out."
Oh, Christ. And, even if he thought that was a nice thing to say, that's also an issue.
Well, I know. Well, you just...
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, it's true. Every day you hear something new about, just something he's fucked up.
There's so many things he could have said. He could have said, "Thank you."
My manager's mum, who's 90 years old, and she's been a lifetime Liberal voter, she just goes, "That man does nothing right."
That's a shocker. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. My next question was...
Exclusive here at Betoota.
Exclusive, yeah. Sorry, Hamish McDonald, we got that one. My next question was, did you think at that time, giving that speech, that the man standing next to you would spend the rest of the year avoiding you?
Oh, goodness, no. Oh dear, I could not have foreseen that. I don't know who could have. Really, I mean, it's just crazy.
You become Australian of the Year. We hear from you in different capacities as an advocate and everything you've been doing since then. And then all of a sudden, the conversation ramps up. Brittany Higgins came out and said that you'd kind of inspired her to speak up, which automatically implicates you. Which, as you said, you don't mind being the first person there.
Yeah, I don't mind. Those are still allegations at this stage, you know. But it's not surprising though to me, because it's the common thread is abuse of power. Certainly, I didn't know it would come out quite like this, but anyone who thinks that this doesn't exist and that wouldn't play out, especially in an environment like that, is kidding themselves, because that's a breeding ground for it. Yeah,
I mean, and it just kept getting more and more and more and more and more, which in this theme of abuse of power, of course, more and more and more came out. As you said, when did you really start seeing the wheels moving towards this rally? That was really quite something else.
Oh, I don't know. It all has happened pretty organically.
Yeah.
And pretty quickly too.
Yeah, and pretty quickly. But the important thing, obviously, with any kind of meaningful change, you have to sustain the momentum. And I think that a lot of people in positions of power who just kind of want this to go away, they want people to get really angry for a little while and then tire themselves out and just sort of give up. So I'm always just kind of encouraging people to be a little bit more measured and consistent and persistent in your agitation. But
don't run out of steam.
Don't run out of steam, and try not to be too angry, like where it's just blind rage. Because at the end of the day, in order to make change, you do actually have to sit down and negotiate with people that you might not agree with. You know, you can't just be spitting venom and...
you're not an abolitionist.
No.
You're not going to burn Parliament down. Yeah, that's something...
Not with my bare hands.
Might be me personally.
No.
Do you think the media did a good job in basically representing the story of how the march came to be? I mean, like it certainly from our perspective, it looked like they tended to cherry pick different things. And
that's what the media do, though, right?
Yeah.
Not here.
Except
not this humble organ.
There's no cherry picking here. There's no need. Everything's gold in Betoota.
They kind of use that, and then they kind of mash different aspects of different stories to suit their own kind of narrative.
Yes.
But,
I mean, Labor's poster child would agree with that, I guess.
That's sort of the problem, I suppose, is there needs to be distinction, because if we get something catastrophically wrong, we could then, lose all of the credibility and lose all of the support for a movement that needs unanimous support.
Do you think that the media did a good enough job to cover it? Like, it seemed for a long time they were basically trying to pretend that this wasn't happening, and they were, just hoping that something big would come along and blow it out of the news cycle.
Like the footy season.
Yeah.
Do I think that the media did a good job?
Yeah. Could have been better.
Could have been better. But I try to be a glass half full person. So, there's always room for improvement, I suppose.
Well, we like to think that we,
nail it every time.
Occupy a space in the media that's a bit,
above.
To the side, above, maybe, but like...
Underground.
But like in terms of what the mainstream media does in like their day-to-day operation, do you think there's more room to grow really when they're covering things of this nature? Oh yeah,
there's so much more room to grow. I mean, just like in terms of how they talk to people who have stories, and I addressed them at the press club, and they didn't really seem to listen to what I was sort of saying.
Where they'll put the abuser's job title.
I know.
And they'll refer to the sex crime as sex attack. Yeah, they won't say rape in the headline. Yeah, and there's you see all those kind of different Instagram pages dedicated to rewriting this article.
Oh, those are fantastic, and they're so accurate though too.
Yeah.
Like the pedophile that abused me, and I wasn't his first victim. I've since spoken to other victims of his, but he did a 17-minute interview with a woman whose name
You don't want to say her name?
No, well, to just don't really want to give her airtime.
Yeah,
but anyway,
yeah.
did it.
With some hack.
Yes. No, in the interview he was complaining about how he lost his job and status in the community, and I was kind of sitting there going, well, maybe you don't rape kids. It isn't. But anyway.
And the media is all too often willing to entertain his narrative or people like his narrative.
Yeah, it's not so much that that's the issue, though, really. I think the main issue is that there's too much of a focus on the superficial, like, physical details.
Yep.
You know, the media are obsessed with outdoing themselves. You know, like, you hear about, I can't think of a really obscene example, but yeah, that's always the focus, like how bad was the rape and how bad was the violence, like how many times were they hit, you know, what kind of weapon were they using, you know, it's all that kind of stuff like that. But it's like, and I don't know if you know who Jess Hill is. She does a lot of work exposing the coercive control that belies domestic violence.
Yep.
It's the same thing.
Yep.
It's like that needs to be the focus, or the grooming and the psychological manipulation, which is, again, that abuse of power. That needs to be the focus.
Not the spectrum of how bad this could have been or how bad.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, because often you hear of like, it wasn't that bad because he only hit you once or something like that. And it's like, what about all the stuff that was boiling for years and years and years, like the emotional abuse and all that sort of stuff like that? Because that's vile. Like that messes with your whole life.
This happens to authors a lot. Someone who's written a memoir where they end up becoming... They find themselves, their work they do, I wouldn't necessarily say a career because no one chooses that, but you end up being, you know, in this movement, and that's what you've been doing for 6 months.
Yeah. I've been doing it for longer than that. Behind the scenes,
but it's not something you chose. You were flung into it, and by your lived experience, I guess.
Yeah, it wasn't really a conscious choice. Yeah. No, but it was always something that I just saw as like common sense, like help each other, support each other, create an environment, you know, a social environment of like belief and acceptance for people regardless of what their story is, whether it's a story of sexual abuse or whatever.
Whatever they're advocating,
normalise talking about shit because we've all got some story and, you know, and then that's how we can reconnect and move forward.
Was there, I mean, you had a career... As an illustrator, you've just said.
Not really, sort of.
I think a lot of illustrators would count, you know, being John Cleese's, you know, go-to illustrator as being, you know...
A career.
Or at least, you know...
Very short-lived one.
One of the big jobs. Career highlight. But was that, you know, Grace Tame, the illustrator, and then there's Grace Tame, the advocate. What were you looking at working at before you kind of found yourself behind the scenes as the face? Were you going to get into the arts? Were you?
I don't know. I actually haven't. I've had such a funny life in that I've never really had the chance to stop and think about what my next move is. Yep. I just have fallen into it, and it's just been pretty spontaneous and random. But here I am. And
have you got good people around you?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I think that's why, you know, because I've always seen that as my number one value in life, just family, friends, community, and having good positive relationships, and then that's been the guide, and you know, all of like what you're doing becomes like secondary, I suppose, so long as it's obviously like a good purpose. But it's more so like who you're doing things with that I think is the real point.
So you told us when we come to Hobart you do tours. Could be another line of work.
For you guys.
Yeah, you and your man. They narrate the wild country of the Apple Isle. Is that home? Does that feel like home? Down home? That kind of,
Yeah, I love Tassie. Always have a special spot
I think
in
it
my
does
heart.
for a lot of Tasmanians.
It feels
You know, they do
Funny
like
that.
going back there. You know, I mean, like it's
I'm saying
to Ricky Ponting. You know, he always used to say, you know, like I do like playing in England because it's a lot like Tasmania in that it's very green and it's cold. Like, okay, Ricky, over there, mate, go and score some runs.
Can you see yourself setting up there?
Yeah, Max and I want to live there. Yeah, buy a bit of land.
Yeah, you got to beat Melbourne to that. The old tree change. Thanks a lot, COVID.
Yeah. Well, before you started speaking in front of all these cameras, had you done much public speaking beforehand? I mean, like,
Not really.
I mean, like, when you get further down the track with, like, the Australia Awards Council, like, is that a service that they start to provide you? Like, if you're in the hunt, it's like, oh, well, we've got to get you some public speaking training and stuff like that.
So that
they just...
No, it literally has been
So they hand you
a
over...
process of flying by the seat of one's pants.
So they hand you over an award and say, let her rip.
Yes.
and didn't she just, like, you?
Yeah.
Everything that obviously the speech resonated with so many people, but no hitches, like no hiccups. That was was there pressure on you? Like, you got to get this right, or you it just felt all one? You felt all one with the microphone and the message you had to deliver.
Yes, well, in the words of Scott Morrison, gee, it felt good to get that out, didn't it? It was, yeah. No, I don't know, because it is, again, it's my truth.
Yeah.
I'm not making anything up.
Yeah.
And so it's authentic, it's real, and I think that's why a lot of people have resonated with it as well, because it's genuine, and a part of me at first was a little bit worried. I was like, I was talking to the people in the Australia Day Council, and I was like, guys, I swear a lot, and, I've got these ugly tattoos, and, I'm worried about that. And they're like, no, you've got spirit, like, that's what we like, and you're real. And I was like, because I was worried that I was going to have to, adhere to all these dress codes and all these
Queen's
fancy
English.
things. And I was like, no. But, and that's what's great about it.
Yeah.
And that's what's great about Australia, is
Yeah.
there's this authenticity to,
Yeah, and
owning your shit. Because
Yeah.
we've obviously got so much shit as well.
Yeah.
But, like,
you being you made you so much more relatable to so many more people.
yeah.
And that's when you start. I've seen you kind of meet a few people, I guess, who are also, well known for doing that. Like, Jimmy Barnes reaches out because he's also been like that from the start. You know, working class man, working class boy.
Yeah.
What is it like? Literally meeting your heroes who come to you and you're their hero.
I don't know. It just goes to show, though, like, we're all people at the end of the day.
Yeah,
like, that's all we are. Whether you're the Prime Minister or you're Jimmy Barnes or
Yeah, I know. There's so much going on right now that's just a pleasant thing that happened in the last 6 months is getting to see Jimmy play.
Yeah, that was really special, though. That was an incredible experience. Yeah, he's a very nice man.
You're not Labor's poster child, but the media would like to call you that. But all of a sudden, you're now relevant to a lot of people who would have never thought twice about you because you're talking about things that are resonating with people more so than any politician ever could.
That's a big claim. I don't know if that's true. Maybe it's because I deal in common sense. Hey!
It helps.
Yeah, it helps.
That's why.
And it's everything you said before, being yourself, being authentic. Have you seen people trying to get around you? Is what I'm trying to ask.
Get around me?
Yeah,
Oh,
trying to take a little bit of the spotlight. Trying to align themselves with Grace Tame. Because it's happened to Betoota. We went down to Parliament House once, and all the media tarts came out.
Yeah.
Absolute dribblers trying to get
They're
their
all there.
photos.
Okay, so when I was interviewed by Kerry O'Brien, it was the day that there was the cabinet reshuffle, and there was the installation of the task force for women's safety.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And the new Assistant Minister for Women was appointed. And the new Assistant Minister for Women is someone who has aligned herself with the commentator who gave my abuser a platform.
Mm-hmm.
She's actually done so multiple times. She's on multiple occasions she's defended this commentator who's, actively supported and enabled a pedophile.
Mm-hmm.
And I said that. I just stated facts. That's what I deal in, really. Common sense and facts. I don't actually see any merit in going tit for tat and entering into slanging matches. It doesn't serve any purpose. So I stated these facts, and the reaction was from her was that I was uninformed of her previous history of pro bono work for survivors of sexual violence.
Yep.
Which is about as good an example of moral licensing as I think I can find, other than, I'm not sexist, I voted for Julia Gillard, I'm not racist, I've got a black friend.
20 years ago, I represented someone in some town.
Yes, exactly.
Nothing to do with this conversation we're having right now.
The corporate people in this world, though, are just, they're a different breed. Really,
Anyway, that's what she came out and said. But then she's also gone to the media and complained because she sent me Instagram direct messages, even though I don't follow her, so they've gotten swept in
the abyss,
into the, like, I'm not joking, thousands that I just can't, I can't go through them all. And she's come out and said that she reached out to me on Instagram, which I think is a little bit like...
I drove past your house and honked.
I opened my living room window and called your name and heard no response. I've reached out.
Yeah, I sat in a room and thought about you. Why haven't you reached out?
Oh, man, that is lightweight response.
And I just sort of thought, it's not that I don't want to sit down and put differences aside in necessary cases and work with people, but I don't believe, I believe that pedophilia is an absolute wrong, right? And if you don't absolutely oppose it, you therefore condone it.
Yeah.
And she's aligned herself with this person who's enabled that sort of culture. And so I don't think that she's the adequate person for the job.
Yeah. In this dwindling cabinet of 8 years of gradual brain drain with each Prime Minister.
Which is saying something.
Which is saying something. Do you feel like they just went woman here?
Yeah. Exactly. And like I said to Kerry O'Brien, we've got to be really careful not to be naively misled by distractions that are posing as solutions.
Performative gestures.
Yeah, performative gestures. Yeah.
So as Australian of the Year, you've got a lot of duties that you have to do in that year, which I think are beholden to you by the organisation, aren't they?
Like coming on this podcast.
There's a few things or something you've
number
got to do
one on the
like
list. Look, they say it's an award, not a role.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Right.
A lot.
Yeah.
And yet.
So is that their way of saying, lace up your footy boots, that's it, we don't want to hear anything? It's like what they say to footballers when footballers have a political opinion. Just go out there and play, please.
No, they have been very supportive.
Yeah.
And rightly so, because most winners of Australian of the Year, again, bar Rosie Batty, they are people who are long-term, career professionals who have infrastructure around them, like a team of staff, assistants and whatnot to help them. Whereas I was just a pleb and a 26-year-old with, no staff. And so, but they've been very helpful in that regard. They took on a lot of Rosie's advice because she was thrown into the deep end, very much so.
That was the next thing I was going to ask. It's Goodsey kind of got a target put on his back after he got the gong as well, and things got worse for him. Rosie Batty ended up, hell and back with the media coverage. And then we kind of look at Brittany Higgins for a completely different example, but in terms of the way people who pop their heads up get backgrounded. And, there was talk that people were sent to look into her boyfriend. And you didn't experience anything like that once you started kind of, becoming a household name? No,
I mean, I've also been because a huge part of my messaging and whatever is about authenticity. I sort of had covered that before I even was nominated for Tasmanian Australian of the Year. I've been very open about my past history of drug addiction and all sorts of getting into nasty situations. That's a part of the trauma though too. And that's why I'm really keen to speak about that sort of stuff like that, because it sheds light on the fact that the abuse that happens doesn't end there. It's got all these different tentacles.
And you backgrounded yourself for everyone, basically.
I did.
This is it.
I background myself. Yeah. I'm very open about that. And there's, again, it's nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah.
You know, we've all slipped up. We're all human beings. We all make mistakes. We all get ourselves into situations that we would rather not be in, and that's just part of life.
So you haven't experienced a hatchet job? I mean, things got pretty bad. Sky News, Rosie Batty. You haven't kind of experienced any, like, attacks on you?
Yeah, there was an article, or there were a few articles, I think it was the Courier Mail, who were like, what gives the Australian of the Year the right to attack the Prime Minister? I think that was the most recent thing that I've seen. But again, the media just... Because I've never... If you listen to me speak, like, I'm not prone to, like, extreme emotion. I'm not going to get really angry. So I've never slammed. I've never attacked. I've never, you know, any of those things. I've just sort of stated facts as they are. And the media says things like that now.
Yeah. You can't be aligned with anyone because it's just you.
No.
This is just what you're saying.
Yeah. And I'm not a political... Well, I'm not aligned to a political party, and... I value negotiation, so if anything, I'm more of probably a left-leaning centrist, but I don't know.
Yeah, you're a tattooed Hobart gal who, you know, draws pictures. Maybe I would say that there's a kind of archetype there that you might be a little left-leaning, but it's in no way are you a firebrand who's going to bring down the government.
No. Yeah.
Well, what's planned for the foreseeable future? I know it's basically hotel... That's where you're living now. You're looking a week and 2 weeks advance. There's no projects, I guess, at this point. It's fly by ear.
Yeah, so the next year looks like a lot of meetings with relevant policymakers and government ministers, which is really exciting. I'm really excited about that. Because to me, like, the whole point of this was to really get the ball rolling on a lot of advocacy and making concrete change, because normalising the conversation is one aspect, and it's actually probably the most important part, because it's how you start to generate the education, which then influences the legislation. But the next cool thing that I'm doing is going up to Brisbane and working with the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation on a campaign called Stop the Stigma.
Yeah, right.
And so that'll be a little film, and they've got some big sponsors behind that, so that'll be cool. And then, just...
Do you reckon it'll be better than that milkshake film?
I think most things are better than that milkshake film. That was very odd.
That was such a big
It actually kind of terrified me. Like, I'm not an easy scare, but that's
like Black Mirror. What the fuck are we watching?
It was actually evil. Have you seen In the Night Garden?
Yes.
It sounded like it was narrated by that fucker. Eagle Piggle, and I was like, what the heck?
Man, you gotta double check these things before they go out. If that was technically the response to.
But like
a lot of these conversations, it was horrible.
But like, you know that because it's come out of like a public office, it's been across 20 desks. It's like, yes, let's film it. Yes, release it.
You know, so that's how I feel about like a lot of mumblecore rap and like music like that. And you go, how many people did this have to go through and get a seal of approval? And yet... nobody stopped it at any point.
It's like it's been signed off. This has been well and truly signed off.
Well, the more desks it has to cross, you know, the least amount of accountability you have. Because you can always shift the blame onto to the next desk.
Yeah, it wasn't desk number 13's fault. It wasn't desk number 12's.
And that's how the public service works.
So true. Oof. Oofty.
But yeah, so that's on the cards there, Brisbane, and then so with this policy advising, is this what?
Yeah.
This is well beyond what just happens in the confines of Parliament House. Now you're talking about community, you're talking about education system, and you're taking it to well beyond, you know, these in-house task force that the government's had to implement in their own building, in their own offices.
Well, any advocate and any activist knows that the real work is done not necessarily there in Parliament. It's done at the community level.
Unteaching, teaching.
Exactly. And it's the most rewarding as well.
Yeah.
Because you actually start to see the benefits of it.
Well, we can already see that the as we said before, this half glass full Tasmanian has there's ripples right across the country. Absolutely results that we can see right now. We could see it within hours of that speech being given. So thank you for joining us today on the Betoota Advocate podcast, Grace Tame. Did it feel good to get that off your chest?
Gee, it felt good to get that out. Thanks, guys. It was awesome.
Grace.